The sign you should never ignore is leaving ordinary conversations feeling strangely guilty, smaller, and confused. Nothing explosive happened, yet you walk back to your desk replaying every word like evidence. You wonder whether you sounded difficult, emotional, careless, defensive, or somehow secretly unprofessional again. That feeling is not random, and it is not always simple workplace stress. Sometimes the most dangerous person at work is not openly rude, loud, or easy to spot. Sometimes they stay polished, helpful-looking, and calm while quietly teaching you to distrust yourself. And once that starts, your energy drains faster than your job title can explain. You stop speaking naturally, start over-explaining harmless decisions, and second-guess emails before pressing send. You think the problem is pressure, but the real problem is psychological contamination. The first useful truth is simple. Healthy workplaces create pressure, but toxic people create confusion. Pressure can exhaust you, but confusion slowly rewires how you see your own reality. That is why one person can affect your whole nervous system more than deadlines ever do. You are not just tired after them, you feel mentally smeared, foggy, and subtly accused. That reaction matters because manipulators rarely begin with obvious attacks that everyone can recognize. They begin with tiny distortions that force you to carry the discomfort privately. A normal coworker leaves you clearer, even after disagreement, because the facts still feel stable. A toxic one leaves you unsettled because they move the facts while watching your reaction. They say they never got your message after answering it yesterday in front of everyone. They claim your tone felt off when your actual words were neutral and brief. They praise your effort publicly, then privately mention concerns they cannot quite clearly define. They ask for initiative, then act irritated when you move without their approval. They tell you to be honest, then punish honesty by calling it negativity. Nothing sounds severe alone, which is exactly why the pattern becomes hard to prove. You keep waiting for one undeniable moment, while the real damage happens through accumulation. It is not the volume of the behavior that breaks your confidence. It is the repetition of mixed signals delivered with enough politeness to seem reasonable. That combination creates a trap because your mind keeps searching for fairness in someone unfair. You tell yourself they are stressed, awkward, misunderstood, or just terrible communicators under pressure. But healthy people may communicate imperfectly without repeatedly making you doubt your own basic perception. Toxic people benefit when you blame yourself for the confusion they keep manufacturing. That is why the feeling after the interaction matters more than their polished wording. Listen carefully to what happens inside you right after dealing with them. If your chest tightens, your mind starts defending itself, and your memory gets scrambled, notice that. If you suddenly feel compelled to explain obvious things, something unhealthy is already happening. Manipulation at work often hides inside forced self-justification, not dramatic office warfare. You know the meeting ended, but somehow you still feel like you are on trial. You know the task was clear, yet afterward they act like you misunderstood everything. You know the deadline shifted, but they speak as if it was always obvious. Then comes the most destabilizing part. They stay calm while you start sounding increasingly distressed. That contrast makes other people trust their composure and question your emotional response. Now you are not only dealing with the original problem, you are dealing with how the problem was framed, remembered, and socially packaged around you. This is why so many competent people look weak inside toxic workplaces. They are not weak people failing under pressure, they are clear people being strategically blurred. And yes, sometimes the person doing this is a manager with soft language and perfect timing. Sometimes it is the jealous coworker who smiles, compliments you, and quietly contaminates your reputation. Sometimes it is the teammate who acts confused whenever your work gets noticed. Sometimes it is the boss who says they support growth but flinches when you become visible. Jealousy in workplaces rarely announces itself as jealousy because that would expose its weakness. Instead, it disguises itself as concern, standards, mentorship, culture, or questions about your attitude. They do not always attack what you did. They attack how others feel about what you did, especially if you are respected. So they plant uncertainty where your confidence used to live. They mention your name with a sigh, a raised eyebrow, or fake disappointment. They say things like, "I just worry about consistency," even when your work is solid. They add, "Maybe I am reading it wrong," which makes the accusation harder to confront. They present themselves as thoughtful while quietly positioning you as unstable, difficult, or risky. And because everything stays subtle, you start monitoring yourself instead of monitoring the pattern. That is the shift toxic people want more than any single argument. Once you begin self-editing around them, they no longer need open control. You will start doing the controlling for them automatically before they even speak. You will rewrite simple emails 5 times to avoid imaginary criticism. You will avoid sharing ideas until someone else says them first. You will laugh when dismissed just to keep the atmosphere light. You will stay late to prove dedication after being subtly framed as careless. You will accept impossible expectations because saying no suddenly feels dangerous. And the tragedy is that from the outside, it can look like professionalism. From the inside, it feels like shrinking to survive somebody else's insecurity. Most people miss this sign because they are taught something deeply unhelpful about work. They were taught that discomfort means growth, so they normalize emotional distortion as ambition. They were taught that difficult personalities are normal, and resilience means tolerating disrespect quietly. They were taught that if they feel targeted, they are probably taking things personally. That belief keeps good people trapped longer than any manipulator ever could alone. Because then every warning signal gets translated into personal weakness instead of useful information. You do not need constant praise at work to know something is wrong. You only need repeated contact with someone who leaves you less clear than before. That is the sign to stop minimizing. Confusion that repeats around one person is data, especially when your instincts were clear beforehand. And no, this does not mean every awkward interaction is abuse. It means recurring confusion deserves attention before it becomes self-doubt, silence, and reputational damage. The workplace version of gaslighting is rarely theatrical. It is administrative, polished, and dressed in productivity language. It sounds like, "We discussed that," when you know the discussion never happened. It sounds like, "I thought you understood," after they changed the expectation midstream. It sounds like, "Nobody else seems confused," when they isolated you from context deliberately. It sounds like, "I'm trying to help you succeed," right after undermining your authority publicly. These phrases work because they redirect the spotlight from behavior onto your interpretation. Now you are defending memory, tone, intention, and competence all at once. That is cognitive overload, and manipulators thrive when your mind is overloaded. A calm, grounded person becomes easier to misrepresent after enough confusion and emotional static. Here is the part many people notice too late. The real threat is not just stress, favoritism, or office politics. The real threat is becoming someone who no longer trusts their own read on people. Once that happens, toxic coworkers gain more access to your decisions than your job description allows. You start asking them inwardly for permission, even when they say nothing. You measure your reality against their reactions instead of observable facts. That is how a subtle manipulator can dominate stronger personalities without ever raising their voice. So let us make this painfully practical. If one person repeatedly leaves you confused, stop treating every interaction like a relationship problem. Start treating it like a pattern management problem. That shift alone changes how much control they have over your nervous system. Your first move is not confrontation. Your first move is documentation. Write down what was said, when it was said, who witnessed it, and what changed later. Do this while the interaction is fresh, before their version starts contaminating your memory. Toxic people often rely on your exhaustion more than their own intelligence. They know most employees will vent emotionally but record nothing clearly. So become someone who records patterns instead of chasing immediate emotional relief. The second move is to stop over-explaining in real time. Over-explaining feels honest, but with manipulators it often functions like surrendered leverage. The more you explain, the more material they get to twist, reframe, and quote selectively. Shorter responses protect clarity better than passionate defenses ever will. Use sentences that close space instead of opening new arguments. I followed the instructions provided. Please send any changes in writing. That was not my understanding of the agreement. I am happy to review the documented expectations. I have already answered that. We can continue when the scope is clear. These are not rude statements. They are clean statements, and clean statements threaten people who live through distortion. The third move is nonverbal, and it matters more than many people realize. Stop rushing to fill silence after they say something provocative or vaguely critical. That pause protects you from reacting inside their frame. Manipulators often say incomplete, loaded things and wait for you to panic. Then your anxious response becomes their proof that you are emotional or difficult. Silence interrupts that transfer. So does neutral eye contact. So does asking one calm question instead of giving a 5-minute defense. What specifically are you referring to? Can you clarify the change? Where is that documented? Which part needs correction? These questions are powerful because they pull fog into the light. Vague control weakens when it must become specific. That is why some toxic people become irritated the moment you ask for precision. They were never trying to solve the issue. They were trying to position you emotionally beneath the issue. There is another mistake intelligent people make in these environments. They keep trying to win privately with someone who is performing publicly. They think if they explain themselves clearly enough, fairness will eventually activate. But unfair people do not resist clarity because they lack understanding. They resist clarity because clarity removes their advantage. This is why a fake apology often changes nothing. You may hear, "Sorry you felt unsupported," followed by the same sabotage next week. You may hear, "I did not mean it that way," with zero curiosity about impact. You may hear, "Let us move forward," before the truth was ever acknowledged. That is not repair. That is image management. And image management is common in toxic workplaces because reputation is currency there. The manipulator is not always trying to destroy you completely. Sometimes they only want enough doubt attached to your name to control your growth. Enough hesitation around you. Enough whispers about your tone. Enough concern about your fit. Enough ambiguity that your excellence now requires extra explanation. That is why high performers often become targets. Competence threatens insecure people because competence exposes their dependence on appearances. If you are calm, skilled, well-liked, or quietly independent, watch who becomes subtly inconsistent. Watch who withholds information then blames your execution. Watch who acts warm when alone, cold in groups, then denies any shift. Watch who only criticizes you where there are no witnesses. Watch who compliments you in ways that reduce you. You are so confident, I just hope others do not misread it. You are talented, but sometimes that can come off intense. You did great, though collaboration matters just as much as results. Notice the hidden message in those lines. They are not simply commenting on behavior. They are training you to associate your strengths with social risk. Once you internalize that, you start dimming yourself voluntarily. You smile smaller. You speak softer. You share less. You apologize earlier. You become easier to manage, and they call that improvement. Do not ignore that transformation if it has started in you. Healthy feedback helps you become more effective without becoming more afraid. Toxic feedback makes you easier to control while pretending to make you better. That difference matters more than whether the feedback sounded technically polite. Here is the identity shift that changes everything. You do not need to become harder, louder, colder, or more aggressive. You need to become more evidence-based than emotionally recruitable. That means trusting patterns over promises. It means trusting consistency over charm. It means trusting written facts over polished denials. It means trusting your post-interaction state when it keeps repeating around the same person. If peace disappears every time they enter the equation, that information is valuable. Stop arguing with information because the source wears a badge, title, smile, or calm voice. A manipulator in office clothes is still a manipulator. And your body often recognizes them before your mind allows the conclusion. That is why you feel drained before you can explain why. That is why Sunday evening anxiety can center around one name, not the whole job. That is why one meeting can derail your confidence more than a full week of tasks. You're not imagining the impact. Your nervous system is responding to repeated relational threat dressed as normal professionalism. Once you see that, your goal changes. You stop trying to be perfectly understood by someone committed to misunderstanding you strategically. You stop chasing closure from people who feed on unfinished emotional business. You stop volunteering your vulnerability into rooms that reward distortion. And slowly, you return to yourself. Your emails become simpler. Your voice becomes steadier. Your memory feels cleaner because you stopped outsourcing reality to manipulative people. You no longer need to prove innocence every afternoon to feel safe by evening. You notice the sign faster now. Not shouting. Not obvious hostility. Not dramatic conflict. Repeated confusion around one person, followed by guilt, self-doubt, and the urge to over-explain. That is the sign. Do not decorate it with benefit of the doubt forever. Do not wait for a bigger betrayal just because the current one looks small. Small distortions repeated long enough can reshape careers, confidence, and emotional health. Take the sign seriously while your voice still feels like yours. Protect clarity before you need recovery. And remember this when someone at work keeps leaving you mentally fogged and subtly on trial. The danger is not that they dislike you. The danger is that they want access to your self-trust. Never hand them that.